Welcome to the Skeptic Zone, the podcast from Australia for science and reason.
Hello and welcome to the Skeptic Zone, episode number 255 on the 8th of September 2013. Richard Saunders here with you from Sydney, Australia. On today's show, well, recently, in the past week, in fact, I went to visit some friends and give some talks in Melbourne, and I was very lucky. At the same time, Dr. Colin Wright was visiting. Now, Dr. Colin Wright is a juggler, he's a mathematician, and he's this sort of otherworldly character who does all sorts of crazy fun things, full of puzzles, full of interesting things, involved with the mathsjam.com organisation. I caught up with Dr. Colin Wright in a cafe in Melbourne where he teaches me a new memory trick, talks about infinity and infinity, you'll understand soon, juggling, mathematics and neckties. And after that, it's Maynard's spooky action. Maynard talks with Hubert van den Bergh about his book, How to Sound Clever, Master the 600 English Words You Pretend to Understand When You Don't. That's very interesting for people in the scientific outlook, I suppose, the scientific organisation, the industry, what's the word I'm looking for? I better read his book. It's always important that you sound clever. Yes, I think that's very important. Anyway, that interview's coming up a little later on in the show. And of course, we have the Week in Science from our good friends at the Royal Institution of Australia, www.riaus.org.au. And to round off the show, one from the vaults, one from the digital audio vaults I've been looking through recently. Some years back, I was a guest on Sydney Radio with host Mike Williams, and we discuss spontaneous human combustion and firewalking. Now, some important notes before we get into the show. A big thank you to my friends in Melbourne at the Mordialic Skeptics and the Victorian Skeptics. If you want to find out more about the Victorian Skeptics and the fine work they do, visit vicskeptics.wordpress.com. I gave a talk down there at the Mordialic Sporting Club. Great turnout. Thanks for everybody who came along. And good news for Sydney-siders. Skeptic Camp is coming up once again. Skeptic Camp at the University of Technology on the 12th of October from 10 a.m. More news about that in the coming weeks. Skeptic Camp in Sydney. It's been going for some years now. Always a great event. Also good news for Sydney-siders on Sunday the 15th of September. So that's Sunday, a little over a week away. At 5:30 p.m. there's a special. An extra special Sydney Skeptics in the Pub with Dr. Pamela Gay. Now, this is going to be at the Crown Hotel, which is at the corner of Elizabeth and Goulburn Streets. Best thing to do is to visit www.skeptics.com.au and find out more. There will be a $10 door fee, but all profits will go to Pamela's Cosmo Quest program. Wow, I can't wait for that one. It's going to be wonderful to see Dr. Pamela Gay very soon. And another highlight for you lucky people in Sydney on the 28th of September, there's the Australian Skeptics dinner meeting. Oh, this one's going to be good. Galit Segev gives her talk about the science behind chocolate. Oh, man. Oh, she makes this chocolate, which is a combination of blue cheese and dark chocolate. It's indescribable. It's sensational. More details go to the website, but that dinner talk for you Sydney-siders, get your tickets while you still can. Popular topic on the 28th of September. Now, when I was in Melbourne, I was actually requested by somebody if I could do this dice thing again. I've got my 20-sided dice. I've got a giant one. This is huge. This is one I picked up in Dragon Con about 5 years ago. It's a giant 20-sided die. All right, everybody, here we go. It's that time again. Think of a number. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way to 20. Are you thinking? Let's see how good you are at predicting. And here we go. 15. And with that thought in my head, I'm going to run downstairs, see if I have any blue cheese and crackers, while we all enjoy the Skeptic Zone.
days when the wall was standing up.
Those were the days.
You couldn't go into the east, and it was only a minor city. It's all changed out of all proportion, I can tell you.
Dr. Steve Roberts is, of course, whinging about the good old days for the Berlin Wall, folks.
That's right, yeah, when we had tanks and pointed guns at each other, and somebody sneezes, actually, whoops, sorry. The missile goes flying over the wall. Oh, those were the days. Yeah.
Those were the days. I'm sitting here with Dr. Colin Wright, who I met in QED twice now.
Twice now.
Good to catch up with you. I'm in Melbourne to give some talks, and you're in town at the same time.
Happened to be visiting my parents from the UK, so managed to catch up with you, which is a bit of an added bonus.
We've had a good day. Went to Inbiggin Books.
Yes, and found a book that I wanted. Actually, I found 30 books I wanted, but I can't ship them all back to the UK, so I only bought one. Very restrained.
Which book did you buy?
I think I bought one by Terry Pratchett on poo, actually.
On poo?
On poo, yeah. Not Pooh Bear, but poo. In one of Terry Pratchett's books, a young lad becomes very fascinated with animals and their products.
Oh.
One of which is poo. But we haven't read the book yet, so I don't exactly know what it's about.
It's about poo, I imagine.
I should imagine it's about poo.
Does it have scratch and smell pages?
I certainly hope it hasn't.
Now, why don't you tell our audience once again, remind them about the fabulous maths opportunity that awaits them all around the world.
Oh, the Maths Jam.
Maths Jam.
Yeah, Maths Jam. Maths Jam is a movement sort of thing that Matt Parker started in London. He got together with a few friends one evening and they started swapping puzzles, and at the end of the evening said that they'd had such a good time, they just had to do it again. And as you can imagine, normally when you say something like that, nothing ever happens. But somebody pulled out their diary and said, well, how about next month? And so they ended up meeting on the second last Tuesday of the month in this London pub, swapping puzzles and tricks and games and just talking about maths generally. But not sort of deep academic maths, but recreational maths.
Yeah.
Maths where you've got puzzles and
conundrums.
Things you exactly so. And so other people started to do this. So people in Manchester are doing, in fact, there are about 14 places in the UK, but there's also a meeting here in Melbourne, second last Tuesday of the month, 7 o'clock. And
do you know where they meet?
I think that the Bull and Bear in Flinders Lane.
You know where that is, Steve?
I don't know it offhand.
No, but it's very easy to find. There's a meeting that comes and goes in Perth, but there's a couple in the US, and there's one in Portugal and a few around. But there's also the annual Maths Jam meeting, which is coming up on the first weekend of November in the UK. And that's a full weekend of people getting together and just talking about recreational maths and puzzles and games and stuff like that.
Wow. And any keen entrepreneur out there would go along and make lots of notes for a book.
Could certainly do that, although we do have some rules.
Oh, yes?
Yeah, the first rule is that you're there to share. So if somebody's there and just making notes, that it will be noted, and somebody will come up to them and say, well, show us something then. But it's never happened yet, so we don't really know what we'll do if somebody does that. But there's the people there are keen on sharing what they know, and keen on showing people things that are new, and then learning things in return, because everybody just wants to enthuse about this subject. It's the ideal place. Second rule, by the way, is that you have to enjoy yourself.
Yeah.
So if you see something that's wrong, then just go and fix it. Don't moan about it. Just fix it. And the third rule is that if somebody else is enjoying themselves, you're not allowed to stop them. So if you know the answer to a puzzle that they're working on, you can go and be smug about it.
Grin away.
But you're not allowed to give them a hint.
Right.
Unless they explicitly ask you for it.
No spoilers.
No spoilers. Absolutely no spoilers. So if they come up and say, look, I'm really stuck on this, give me a hint, then that's fine. But if they're working on it, for some of them, that's their enjoyment. That's the way they love to spend time doing this. So you're not allowed to spoil somebody else's enjoyment. This is the fourth one we've had, and so far they've been great successes.
The fourth annual?
The fourth annual.
Wow.
Yeah, so the Maths Jams have been running for about 5.5 years now, the monthly meetings. And so we've started up the annual gathering, just sort of a reflection of the Gathering for Gardner, which is a similar thing in the US, and the Colloquium of Recreational Maths, which is run in Portugal every 2 years. So Gathering for Gardner, Recreational Maths Colloquium, they bounce back and forth every 2 years each, and the Maths Jam sort of sits between those.
And where can people go to find out more about Maths Jam?
Oh, www.mathsjam.com.
That's difficult to remember.
That's difficult to remember.
You told me something earlier today And we worked out my bacon number by doing this.
Oh, yeah.
I have a bacon number of 2.
Yeah, with Hugh Jackman.
That's right. Google that, everybody. We're in a cafe, hence the cafe sound effects you hear in the background. But you told me a way of a memory trick.
Oh, yeah. Just if you want to remember something and it's just this random fact that's not connected to anything else, usually you can connect something into something else you already know, create a pattern or a structure which helps you remember it, which is the way memory champions do this sort of thing. But there's a technique known as spaced repetition.
Spaced repetition.
Spaced repetition. So,
Spaced.
Yeah,
ED.
spaced.
Right.
ED.
Yeah.
So you think to yourself, okay, random fact about something, got no idea, really hopeless at pulling these things out. You know, pi equals 3.1415926535. So you just write that down and you look at it and you think, okay, try and remember it, close my eyes, recite it, try and remember it, put it down. And then 1 minute later, try to recall it. Okay? And if you don't do reasonably well, then 1 minute after that, do it again.
Right.
So you do it at 1 minute spacing until you've remembered it for that. And then put it off to 2 minute spacing, so double the and then if you do reasonably well, then go out to 5 minutes and go out to 10 minutes, each time more or less doubling the gap. And if you find that you falter, then keep it at that gap until you're okay, and then start doubling the gap again. And it doesn't take very many doublings to have it 1 day apart. So you just pull it out and look at it in the morning to refresh your memory. You do that 2 days in a row, and then do it later in that week, and then do it the next week, and you suddenly find that it's a month before you need to remind you. You can just pull it out.
Yeah.
If you never use it, you need to keep refreshing it at sort of 1 month's notice or 2 months' notice. But if you use it once a month, there you are. You've already got it often enough that it's keeping it fresh enough. And it's just a great technique for memorising stuff. So my wife and I memorise poetry like this. You can remember theorems for exams, you can remember bits of prose, you can remember magic tricks, bits of manipulation, anything you need to remember.
Of course, so it's not just memorising a sequence of words, so to speak, like a poem or a theorem or something, but a technique.
Yeah, and spaced repetition is a technique to memorise anything that you can keep with a bit of practice. It helps you to practice it often enough. So practice it now and again, then double the spacing, practice it again.
I should try that with origami.
Yeah. No, I mean, I'm sure you'll find that there are things that you've folded that you've forgotten. You want to go back to.
There are many.
Yeah.
Many. Someone will say to me, can you make this? And I thought, great. I get a bit of paper out, and then I thought, what do I do next?
Yeah.
Because it's been a long time since I've made it. There are some things which actually I can make after 20 years because they're so ingrained in my head. But there are a number of things that I have to quickly refer back to my notes. I never mind doing that, but it's more fun to do it just...
If you can do it just on the fly.
Yeah, on the fly.
It's the same with juggling patterns. People will come to me and say, can you juggle this? Can you juggle this? And I'll go, yeah, and then I pick up the balls and my body just won't do it. So if you have a list of things, start with one of them, practice it sort of every 5 minutes, every 10 minutes, every hour, and then you find that you've largely got that under control, but you need to come back to it the next day. And so it is that you can start to build up your repertoire. So long as you revisit your repertoire often enough. And when you want to get a new one to add to it, well, first of all, you've got your body of experience, which will help you.
Yeah.
But do it once, do it again immediately, do it again a little bit later, get distracted by conversation, do it again 10 minutes later, and come back to it with increasing gaps, repeating them at a spacing that increases. But a spaced repetition.
And where did you...
it's all over... I don't remember reading about it. It's all over the interwebs. You can find it. No, knowing that didn't work because once I've got the technique, I don't think... Yeah, I should do more to remember where I find things. That's a really bad thing that I do. Is forget where I find things. I should remember.
But you found it. And you tried it and it works.
It works brilliantly. Yeah, I've remembered a couple of poems using this technique, some mathematics, some tricks, some puzzles. It just works brilliantly well.
When I meet people, I try it. Although I meet so many people, it's very difficult, but you look at the face, and you look at something on the face, and you associate the name, and you try to make that click. I started a new job once many years ago, and I tried that technique with everybody in the office.
And it worked
Yeah.
It just worked. It's just a matter of making sure you do that when you meet somebody.
Yeah, it's also a problem though sometimes if you think, oh, this person's got a big nose, and so I remember his name is a big name. His name is Bartholomew. It starts with a B, and of course you meet Bartholomew again. You think big nose. Oh, what is the name? So it's difficult sometimes to move from the mnemonic to the name. So you do need to be a little bit careful sometimes.
Now, how can people in the UK, because that's where you're based, how can they catch your juggling act or your talks?
Well, if you actually just Google for my name, Colin Wright Juggling, that will do for you, or Colin Wright Maths, that will do. Colin Wright's a fairly common name, so there are quite a lot of other people, including some people with big internet presences. So if you just add juggling or maths on that, my website is difficult to spell, solipsis.co.uk, solipsys.co.uk. But Googling for me is the easiest thing to do.
Because not only do you give talks on mathematics and juggling, but you give general mathematics talks anyway.
Absolutely. I do around about 120 talks a year, and only 70 or 80 of them are on juggling. The other ones are on things like topology or infinity or getting lost in 2,000 dimensions or the physics of radar.
And then you tell me that there's more than one infinity.
There's more than one size of infinity, but there's also more than one type of infinity. Because there's more than one type of counting. We can count things in how many there are, 1, 2, 3, 4, but we can also count where things are in line, first, second, third, fourth.
Yeah.
And if you try and push that to extremes and think about infinity, you can talk about how many things there are in a sack.
Yes.
But there's also a model of arithmetic in infinity where it matters which order they come in. So if you imagine having an infinitely long line of things, like just the numbers themselves, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on, and look at it from a distance, it's a great long line of beads stretching off into the distance further than you can see.
Yes.
Okay. Now, if you put one on the front, let's just call that omega, little omega, so like a curly W. So that's omega. If you put one on the front, if you take 1 plus omega, but look at it from a distance, it still looks the same.
Yeah.
Right? But if you put one at the other end, if you take omega plus 1, now it looks different because there's something that's bigger than everything else. So there is a last thing in that case. Right?
Well, so if you start, puzzled looks around
here. This is the kind of thing where there's actually an entire year university course on arithmetic beyond the infinite, transfinite arithmetic. But if you keep the ordering of things and then try and say, well, I want to work with infinity, what happens? You get a different arithmetic than if you just talk about how many things there are in this sack. Because if there's this collection of things in a sack and you chuck one in, you can't tell the difference. You take 2 sacks with infinitely many things and mix them up, you can't tell the difference. So it's difficult to get a bigger infinity. But you can do it. And a guy called Gödel in the early 1900s did that. Actually, late 1800s did the primary work on it, 1870s did that. But it's a fascinating area, utterly mind-blowing, and it turns out to be surprisingly useful as a way of dealing with things above the level of detail. So when you deal with pictures, you want to imagine that it's perfectly continuous and only afterwards come to the pixel version, where you've got little cells of colour. So it's discrete, there's a finite number of them. So you want to start by pretending there's infinitely many pixels. And when you do the mathematics of image analysis and image transformations, you pretend that it's continuous. It's not pixelated. And you can do your analysis there, and it's much easier. And only later turn it into the pixel version. So this mathematics of the infinite seems like it's just never going to be useful, but it turns out that it is. That's the bizarre thing about maths, is it turns out to be useful in unexpected places in unexpected ways.
So juggling, eh?
So juggling, yeah. No, exactly. We found new juggling patterns because of mathematics. It's just bizarre the way mathematics will turn up in strange places.
Now, also, I really enjoyed your talk on juggling, which I saw online, and I would imagine that our listeners are welcome to Google that up and have a look at that.
There's several versions of it on YouTube.
On YouTube, if you look for Colin Wright and juggling, you see his whole presentation. I watched it a couple of weeks ago or a couple of months ago. I guess after we met the second time in the UK this year, when I came home, I looked that up and I was transfixed. It's a funny show, but it's the most interesting way that juggling can be described with the beats and the measures and the...
Yeah, this is
fascinating.
What I've done is I've taken one way of simplifying the juggling, because there's just so much you can do in juggling with warping the timing, throwing from strange places, using different objects.
More than I could know, yeah.
Absolutely. So what we did was we said, well, it's impossible to describe. We've got notations for music, for dance, for language. We wanted a notation for juggling, but there's just so much. It's so complicated. You can't get everything all at once. So we said, let's go really, really simply. Let's not warp the timing. Let's not do cool, funky rhythms. Let's just do a fixed metronomic beat. Let's only do it with two hands. Let's have the hands taking it in turns all the time. And when you do that, it becomes quite straightforward to enumerate completely all of the different repetitive patterns there are in juggling. And it turned out that there were some we didn't know. And juggling's been around for thousands of years, and yet because we started this modelling method, we found new patterns that nobody had ever done before. So we thought there's got to be maths underneath this to do it, and sure enough, there's some really cool stuff going on underneath.
Well, you know, when I saw that and I saw the diagrams that you created, it reminded me of shoelaces.
Oh yeah, shoelace tying. Yeah. And actually there's a great book on the 85 ways to tie a tie. So a couple of guys did exactly the same thing. You know, do you pass the loose end over the top or put it through the middle?
Yeah.
And if you put it through the middle, you can then bring it out on the left or on the right. And so they ended up with strings of these things, and some of them end up with a nice neat knot, and some of them don't. And they ended up enumerating all 85 ways to tie a tie. And out of this comes the Windsor knot, the full Windsor, the half Windsor, the four overhand, all of those. But there was also a brand new one.
Get out.
And it's nice, it's neat, it's clean, it's elegant, and it was completely unknown. It's symmetrical. And when he went into a haberdasher's and said, I'd like to buy a tie, they said, certainly, try this one on. He started to tie it using this new technique. And the guy in the shop said, well, if Sir learned how to tie a tie... Could you do that again, sir? It's just completely unknown, and it's a gorgeous one. It's a fascinating little book that introduces you to this idea of mathematics arising in unexpected ways, in unexpected places, to show you things you never suspected. And that's what happens with the juggling, and that's what happens at Maths Jam all the time, is we're finding... You just play with these things, and out of these sometimes come bizarre things like how to measure the distance to the moon with a pendulum, how to measure the size of the Earth with a stopwatch and a ladder. Just amazing things. And that's why we love to play with maths. And it's not deep, it's not heavy, it's not equations, it's not formulas, it's not calculations. Sometimes it's patterns and diagrams, and it's just cool to share this with other people who then have that enthusiasm as well.
Well, Colin Wright, thank you very much for having a chat. And I don't know if I'll catch up with you in the next QED. Who knows?
Who knows?
But next time I'm in the UK and there's a Maths Jam, I'll certainly be...
Certainly look me up.
Front and centre.
Yep.
Thank you very much.
Cheers.
Award-winning weekly science show in French hosted by a bunch of crazy enthusiasts. We are convinced that the greatest ideas in science are quite easy to grasp as long as they are presented with passion, using a vocabulary common to all curious minds, whatever their academic background, if any. You don't understand French yet? Well, it's never too late. All our stories have a written transcript on the website, and people from all around the world are using our content to learn Molière's language. Our topics range from 0 to infinity, from evolution to artificial life, from electromagnetism to the science of introverts. We just love mathematics, science, critical thinking. So do you? Want to join? You can subscribe to the podcast for free from our website, podcastscience.fm, that's in one word. You also find us on iTunes and SoundCloud. See you soon, hopefully. Hâte de vous accueillir. À bientôt sur Podcast Science.
Welcome to A Week in Science from RiAus, bringing you the science news you need to know. This week in science we saw computer games for multitasking, circumcision versus HIV, and frogs listening through their mouths. Mysterious forest islands in Bolivian grasslands are evidence of ancient human use of that area. These small forests were thought to be ancient landforms, long-term bird rookeries, or termite mounds. What was found was quite different. They have turned out to be waste piles that have been used for thousands of years. The piles of freshwater snails, animal bones and charcoal are rubbish from hunter-gatherers dating back at least 10,000 years. This means we're going to have to rethink how humans use these challenging grassland environments. Playing computer games may be good for your brain after all, particularly if you're getting old. Adults aged between 20 and 79 played a specially designed driving game and were assessed on how well they multitasked. The results showed that the participants' performance decreased with age. But older participants were actually able to increase their multitasking ability by playing the game more. You're listening to A Week in Science from RiAus. And now, 4 science headlines in 30 seconds. Voluntary male circumcision in South African communities has been linked with reduced rates of HIV. A betrayal of trust late in a relationship triggers a different part of the brain than a similar event early in the relationship and is more likely to be forgiven. Eating whole fruit reduces your risk of type 2 diabetes, but drinking only fruit juice may increase it. And the Gardener's Seychelles frog doesn't have ears because it hears through its mouth. Last week we asked what percentage of junk food ads for kids feature free toys. The answer, according to new research, is 70%. This week, a historical science fact for you. Did you know that the creator of Sherlock Holmes, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, was a doctor who studied neurology? That's it for This Week in Science. For more information on these and other science news stories, go to the RiAus website, riaus.org.au. Follow us on Twitter using the hashtag WeekInSci and like us on Facebook. I'm Tanya Meyer and I'll catch you next week.
Here's Maynard's spooky action at a distance.
Ladies and gentlemen, I've got a guy on the phone now who's written a book, How to Sound Really Clever. And he's certainly succeeded because his name's Hubert van der Bergh, if that is his real name. Now, he's a bit of a language enthusiast. He's read French and linguistics at Oxford University. And that means he's intimately acquainted with the seminal work of Noam Chomsky, I imagine. Hubert, how are you?
I'm very good indeed, thanks, Maynard. Thanks for having me on the show.
Oh, look, it's great to have you. I used the word seminal there with Noam Chomsky. Is that the correct use of the linguistics professor's work?
It certainly is, actually. That's very impressive, if I might say so. And yeah, seminal is one of my favourites. It's actually from the Latin seed, and it's all about sowing the seeds for the future. And Chomsky, I encountered him a little bit in linguistics, so yeah.
Yeah, I always find that there's how I try and sound clever is I throw names like Noam Chomsky in because most of the time people know that he's a smart guy, but they don't know much about linguistics like myself, so I'll get a pass on that. That's how I sound clever. You've got 600 words in your book here that will probably work if you can use them correctly. And I've got to say, you've got the name to start with there, Hubert van der Bergh. That's great.
Thank you very much. Well, it's from the mountains in Belgium, but thank you. That's very kind. Well, these words are, I used to hear them out loud, and I think families give their children one or two of these words. I know one friend, his mother talks about titivating the Christmas tree every year, adding a little bit of spice to the tree. And also I see them written in newspaper articles, and I just thought nobody I know actually understands these words, and no one interrupts a speaker halfway through a conversation, and so no one's actually improving their vocabulary at any time. So I put them all down and use some examples involving celebrities so I could understand them. And I mean, I might give you a couple of examples, maybe.
Oh, look, yeah, please, because we're all trying to get to do this, but give us a few examples.
Yeah. Okay. Well, so I'll to start with some of the ones I used to get very wrong. So stuff like nonplussed. People use that quite a lot, and they usually mean by that that they weren't shocked. They were left slightly cold by an experience and nonplussed by the theatre that night. But actually, it means to be very shocked, because it comes from the French non plus, which means nothing more. You can do nothing more, but you're so shocked. So actually, the word you want to use is indifferent. The nonplussed is misused quite a lot, that one. And then also a word like sanguine. I don't know how you use that, but I always used to think it meant you're quite relaxed about a situation. You're sanguine about a problem at work. It actually means optimistic, and it comes from the Latin sanguis, blood, which means you had rosy cheeks because you're optimistic about something. So I was totally misusing that one as well.
Look, I was one of the words you've got in your book that I was glad to see there, because I've always assumed that you could only use it in one way, and that is the extreme word pogrom, which I always thought was a violent riot and only directed towards Jews. But its root means that it's a government-sponsored aggression, and it could be against any ethnic group. Is that correct?
That's right, exactly. I mean, there have been, for example, recently the U.S. press described Obama as having a pogrom against Christians in terms of appointing non-Christian law professors exclusively to senior posts and things like that. I mean, it started off very much as pogroms against the Jews in Russia in the 19th century, but then it does encompass any government-organised massacre against lots of different groups, exactly.
Now, because meanings for words can change, I mean, that could be an example. If you used it now and it wasn't against a Jewish group, you could get people complaining because they would think you're using the word wrong.
Exactly, and you do get that quite a lot. And another one is decimate, which everyone assumes means to totally destroy something. You talk about a team being decimated by the other team in a football match, but actually it means to just skim the surface, because it comes from the Latin tradition as when you conquered a team, you'd kill one man in every 10, which obviously was devastating, but it wasn't. You didn't destroy 9 out of 10. It's only 1 out of 10. You're just skimming the surface of something. You're not actually really destroying them. Right. So again, that's a word that's misused.
So, we were decimated. You say, what? Well, there's 90% of you left. So
exactly.
That is a very interesting. And also, I've been using the word from the Fustian. Fustian, and every time I say it, people think I'm saying Faustian. Oh, the play with the devil on his back. No, Fustian. And it's a word that is not used at all anymore. Do you hear it at all in conversation?
Yeah, I have actually. I've seen it in articles and seen it. I think I've heard a couple of people use it. I mean, well, it's a very nice one because it's again referred to that stuffing you put inside pillows. This is used in the 12th century for padding out pillows, and so it means pompous of speech because you're padding out your language as well. So it's a nice one, that one. There are some fun stories behind these words, like that one. And then there's also things like dog days, the summer days, I was looking up that the other day, and it's because between July and September, the Romans used to believe the sun rose in line with the dog star, and that was what accounted for the heat in the minds of the Romans. But actually, that's not scientifically true. The dog star is not linked to the heat. But anyway, the name stuck, even though the science is wrong. And so we still use it. And then the other word, pastiche, which is a kind of mixture of stars, it actually refers to pastry and how that's all mixed together through flour and fat and oil and delicious things to eat. And so that's where you get the word pastiche from pastry. So there are some quite fun stories behind these as well, actually.
Now, do you think if in the bid to try and sound a little bit more clever, you use these words and no one knows what you mean and you have to explain them, that could just be a different kind of annoying for them?
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, I agree. I think there's, if you misuse them, then there's a danger that they're unhelpful for everyone. I think what's nice about them is that people very quickly get them from the context, and actually people like a slight zany word to be thrown in once in a while, just for a bit of variety apart from anything else, I think. So I think in the other ones, they don't have any synonyms. So if you don't know them, then you can't express yourself using any other word. So there's a word like quixotic as well, which is from Don Quixote, and that's about all about the excessive, dreamy idealism of Don Quixote. So if you someone was on a date and they put a coat over a puddle for someone to step over a puddle of water, and they ruined their coat. That would be an example of quixotic behaviour. So it's really just a little bit excessive. But there's no other word in the language that encompasses that, you see, so you don't know it.
That's true. And do you actually, where do you go to have a look for the usage of new words or old words that are coming back? Is there a website that looks at this kind of thing? Is there a learned place of new words that are being born that we can look at?
No, there isn't actually. I mean, I just got them by over a few years. I just took notes from newspapers and from conversations, and whenever I came across a word more than a few times, then I'd take it down. I wouldn't include stuff that was a one-off because it wouldn't be useful. But there isn't actually a website that does them. Well, the only thing is every year, obviously, the Oxford English Dictionary certainly over here does a great survey of all the new words they're using. We've got omnishambles in this year to describe the government, I think.
That's great. I like that.
And then there are a few others like that going around. And of course, a lot of them are linked to new technologies. The selfie came in this year as well and things like that. So, but there isn't a sort of definitive source at the moment.
And how do you
do them? I mean, I've got a Twitter account @SoundClever, and every day I try and do a new word for people to which I've seen in the newspaper, which I'll tweet that day, and I find that quite fun to do.
Oh, okay. Now that Twitter account is one word, and it's just @SoundsClever?
Yeah, @SoundClever with no S in the middle, just SoundClever. Yep, @SoundClever.
Well, we can follow you on that. This is an amazing bunch of words that you put together here. And how long did you say it took to find these ones?
Well, it took about 2 years of actually sort of stalking them and trapping them, as it were, and then another 6 months to write them all up and find some good examples, hopefully. But it's funny because, apparently we've all got 20,000 words in our vocabularies, and it's only 600 that actually make the difference between, being able to fully express yourself and not, it might be. And since I wrote this book, I found that when you have a thought, it's much easier to remember that thought, because if you can link the thought to a word, then it stays with you a bit longer. So I think it's very good just for general mental cogitation, in my view.
Yeah. Look, I think it's a great book. How to Sound Really Clever. You can dip into it a little bit. You can dip into it a lot. And I would suggest before you go out there and you try a few of these words, that you get online and get an audio sample of this so that you can get a bit of an idea if your pronunciation is correct.
Yes, exactly. And dictionary.com is very good for that, because they have a little speaker button next to each word, and you can just click on it and listen to it.
Although sometimes it can be a bit American.
Yes, it can, absolutely right. Yeah.
And do you feel that the Americans have done a lot to ruin the allegedly English language, or do you think it's part of the evolution?
No, I think they've actually been. I very much like the way the Americans talk, because they've resurrected a few words that certainly in England we stopped using. Some lovely ones like discombobulated, which is just a lovely word, and it obviously means to be confused, as if you tripped over and hurt your head. And that used to be used a lot in England, and now Americans use it in everyday speech. I was very surprised to hear that when I was in New York. So I think they have resurrected some great words there, and then they do come up with some new interpretations, and some of them can be confusing. I mean, one of them is this word substantive, and what does that mean compared to substantial? And substantive, I had to look that up for the book, because I was kept on hearing and I didn't know really what the difference was. And actually, substantive just means it's got a basis in reality. So in other words, it's not a lie. You can talk about a journalist coming up with a lot of substantive facts. So it's not quite the same as substantial. But I think some of those kind of things, they can be confusing. Another one is enormity, and I don't know whether that came from America, but people talk about the enormity of a situation. I was watching the Wimbledon final on television this summer, and the commentators spoke about the enormity of the match in front of us. Enormity actually means great evil. You talk about the enormity of Hitler's crimes, but you shouldn't use it outside of that, because the word you want is enormousness, and there's a big difference between them. I know it sounds slightly pedantic, but it's interesting. I never knew enormity meant huge evil.
Yes, there is a recently diagnosed psychiatric condition where you think that someone's making a movie of you or you're continuously being observed, called the Truman Syndrome. So I'm wondering if a word may evolve as a Trumanism or something like that, which would mean something completely apart from the presidency of Harry Truman, but reflecting to that. Is that the kind of thing you can see evolving?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, I think I looked this up because I've been trying to get a few new words of my own into the language, and I've failed very singularly so far. But
it's kind of, you have to have a certain number of people recognise it, don't you?
Yes. I think the rule is you've got to see it written down in a newspaper or a national publication 5 times, and then you've got to send it off to the Oxford English Dictionary or another dictionary and say, here's proof. But I've been trying to get the following word in, because when your phone rings, your mobile phone in your pocket, and you pick it up, and actually it hasn't rung at all, you just imagined it. And I try and call that the fan tone. But I haven't succeeded in getting that into the language.
So that's Phantone?
Exactly.
Fantone.
Exactly.
See, I thought I was sounding clever until I was chatting with you, Hubert van der Bergh, but I think I'm just where I started.
No, thank you very much indeed. It's very good to talk. It's really good fun, thank you.
Look, the book is How to Sound Really Clever, Hubert van der Bergh. It's by Bloomsbury, and give it a read, and like I said, use it carefully.
Now on Belfast FM, we turn to the personal ads. Easygoing and confident skeptic seeks other critical thinkers for fun, laughter and good times. Must be willing to apply logic liberally and a good listener. Expect something new and interesting every month. Come and meet me in Belfast in Northern Ireland. If this sounds like you, check out my profile on belfastskeptics.com. Music by Kevin MacLeod.
And with that, we say a very good evening to Richard Saunders. Go, Richard.
Good evening again, Mike.
How are you?
Not too bad, fit and healthy.
Good on you. Good. Look, I enjoyed our last conversation. I thought we could maybe encapsulate a few things in future, just every other couple of weeks or whatever, and just catch up with you, which I'm glad you've said yes to.
Sounds like a lot of fun.
It does indeed. One of the topics tonight, and I've always been interested in this because I've never really worked out why, and we're talking about spontaneous human combustion. And I suppose many people think that human beings just literally burst into flames, but do they?
Well, it's a very strange story indeed, spontaneous human combustion, and a lot of people out there have certainly heard of it, and some maybe even fearful of it, but many people think that human beings can literally burn or burst into flames. Strange cases with photographs by investigating police show the remains of people who have almost entirely been destroyed by fire, even as far as turning their bones into powder, which is very strange indeed. And also, one of the weirdest aspects of these cases was the room and the house that the people were in didn't burn down, yet such things as TV sets and radios and other things in the room were melted but not burnt.
I know, and I've seen some of those photos too, Richard, and it was really, I think the one I remember, was someone sitting in an armchair, and the whole armchair was burnt and the person was burnt, and just the surrounds a little, but nothing else. It was really weird.
Yeah, and this really did baffle investigators and police and firemen for a very long time. The case you're referring to was one by the name of Mrs. Mary Reeser from Florida. Now, this was back in 1951. When the police came in, they found the scant remains of her body completely consumed by fire, sitting in an armchair, which was very strange.
Yeah.
And another strange case was Dr. John Bentley, and this was 1966. And what investigators found when they went to his bathroom, or maybe it was one of the family members who originally discovered it, was just a hole burnt in the floor, and the lower part of a leg was all that was left.
Oh, yes. I think I remember seeing that. Tell us about the wick effect. What is a wick effect?
Okay, now, again, this is very confusing for the police and investigators and scientists. And the reason they hit on eventually, and this is after really strange, far-fetched reasons had been thrown back and forth, like ball lightning or unknown energies from science, And one of the most popular explanations through the last couple of centuries is that the victims simply drank too much alcohol. Now, I think we're all in trouble if that's really the
Yes.
kind of science.
I might keep a bucket of water beside the bed in that case.
That's right.
Yeah.
But all these other explanations really didn't hold water scientifically. But then scientists came across something which they call the wick effect, and this was helped largely by, luckily or unluckily for the victims, sometimes murderers, after killing their victims, would try to burn the body to hide the evidence. And investigators noticed that sometimes the bodies resembled very closely the cases of spontaneous or so-called spontaneous human combustion. One murderer even confessed in France to using Chanel No. 5 to fuel the fire of the victim, which was a way to go, I'm sure.
I guess so. So, well, the upshot of this whole thing, have they actually got to the bottom of this and the title spontaneous combustion?
Yes, they really have. The title spontaneous human combustion really should be stopped now. It's more slow burning, and this is how it works. It's very interesting. There were clues all along to support the wick theory, and the wick theory basically says that once somebody drops a match or something, a cigarette even, onto their clothes, if they can't put it out, and sometimes the person has sadly died by a heart attack or they're in their sleep and they've woken up too late, the fire will burn through their clothes, and it sounds a bit horrible, but it'll burn into their body and start to burn the fat. The fat drips into the clothes themselves. That then fuels the fire, and the clothes act like a wick. If you can imagine a candle, when you light it, the wax is fueling that tiny little wick.
Yeah.
In this case, the body fat, the melted body fat, soaks into the clothes, soaks into the carpet, and even soaks into the armchair, and just causes the fire to burn, but burn in a very slow fashion with low flames, cause a great deal of heat. That's why TVs and other things in the room melt, because there's a huge amount of heat. But the fire, the flames themselves, are very small. So the rest of the room doesn't necessarily catch on fire.
That's very interesting. A lot of people mightn't accept that explanation in terms of there was some tests done with pigs.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. In fact, not so long ago, only in 1998, was this theory really put to the test, where the body of a dead pig, as pigs and humans have similar percentage of body fat, was wrapped in a blanket and set on fire in a controlled room to simulate what people thought was spontaneous human combustion. Over the next 6 hours, the pig continued to burn and smolder, and the fat went into the blanket, the fat went into the carpet. And after only 5 hours of this smouldering burning, even the bones began to turn into powder, and more fuel was released from the bone marrow, which itself is about 80% fat. Temperatures in the pig reached 812 degrees Celsius.
Wow.
This is more than enough over 6 or 7 hour period to char the body, the bones, the lot.
That's amazing. Really amazing stuff. The other thing on the agenda tonight, and I've got to tell you before we start this chat, folks, we're talking about fire walking. I've actually done this.
You have?
I have. Well, I mean, it seems that some people can do the impossible and walk on fire, and it was a mental thing for me, and I'm trying to think, I think it was during the Walsh show. We set up a fire out the back, and it was mind over matter, I think, was the way we were going with it. And they built this fire, and they got the coals all smoothed out and whatever. And I remember at the time, I just kept my brain, and I just thought neutral, and I'm going to walk across this, and it's going to happen. And I did. And there was only one very small sort of singe on one of the heels, but you just walk quickly, and you get across to the other side.
That's right. And for a long time, people were really baffled about this, because although we hear the term mind over matter a lot, when it comes to something like fire and its reaction with the body, mind over matter really can't explain why the feet don't burn. So scientists and skeptics, I guess, really looked into this. And it really does seem on the face of it to be quite impossible. And some cultures ranging from the Pacific Islands to even Sri Lanka do fire walking as part of their rich traditions, and you can go and visit those, and they put on a show. But yeah, as you're right in thinking that today fire walking is used mainly by motivational speakers in the New Age movement. In fact, people can pay hundreds of dollars to get enough mystical energy in order to do fire walking, usually at the end of a 2 or 3 day course. But the truth of the matter is quite interesting from a scientific point of view. It turns out that anybody can do fire walking, and all you need is just a little dose of courage to get going and walk across the coals, and that's the key to the whole thing. It's really hot coal walking as opposed to fire walking, because by the time people actually get to walk on the bed of coals, the fire has quite died down. And it turns out that coals and ash are a poor conductor of heat. And if your feet are only in contact with the hot coals for a short amount of time, and typically 2, 3, 4, 5 steps and you're off, there's simply not enough time for all the heat to be transferred into your foot. In fact, way back in 1994, the famous marathon runner Steve Monaghetti took part in the Australian Skeptics Fire Walk in Ballarat to demonstrate to everybody that anybody at all can do fire walking, and a lot of the locals joined in and they didn't have to pay any money for that.
Only for the hospital. Anyway, let's not go there. Fabulous talking to you, Richard. Thank you for your time tonight, and we'll catch you very shortly for another look into the myths and mysteries of this world.
Thanks, Mike. Good
on
talking to
you. You too. Good on you. That's Richard Saunders there from the Australian Skeptics Society and Mysterious Things Investigators.
您现在收听的是 Skeptic Zone， 我是丽丝，我们的网址是 skeptoid.com.cn。Skeptoid 是一个科学类 podcast 节目，我们每期都会讨论新的话题，包括探讨流行的传奇故事、阴谋论，或者是声称超自然的现象。您可以到 iTunes 的中文网站下载 Skeptoid， 或者是访问我们的网址skeptoid.com.cn. The Skeptoid Science Podcast by Brian Dunning is now available for Chinese audience. Please tell your Chinese friends to visit skeptoid.com.cn or find Skeptoid on the Chinese iTunes Store. I'm Li Si from skeptoid.com.cn.
Thank you for listening to the Skeptic Zone, and I hope that in the coming week I should be able to score a great interview with Dr. Pamela Gay. And thanks to Maynard, who I caught up with just the other day for a coffee and a chat. Good to see you, Maynard. Don't forget, all you Sydney people, visit www.skeptics.com.au to see all those upcoming events like the Skeptics in the Pub special meeting with Pamela Gay on the 15th, and the chocolate dinner talk on the 28th. Not to be missed. But for this week, with one more roll of the dice, are you ready? Here we go. Okay, these things happen. 15 again. This is Richard Saunders, signing off from Sydney, Australia. 11.
You've been listening to the Skeptic Zone. Visit our website at www.skepticzone.tv for comments, contacts, and extra video reports.